the agency retrieve, in fact, its temporary nature. We have been a temporary agency for 75 years, but if we are genuinely committed to a political pathway today, we might retrieve the temporary nature of the agency.
And what about with the Israelis? Are there direct talks or indirect talks through mediators to press home this point that you've made this week at the UN, that if UNRWA has to stand down, ultimately it's up to Israel to take care of the people on the ground in Gaza?
Yes, ultimately, if UNRWA has to end up its activity, and UNRWA is a United Nations response to the plight of the Palestinian refugees, UNRWA in reality is a tool of the international community, of the UN General Assembly. So if UNRWA is dismantled or has to end its activities on demand of one member state, that means the onus will shift back on the shoulder of the occupying power, being the state of Israel, and they will have to be the one to provide education and primary health to millions of Palestinians.
You've said this law is politically motivated. What did you mean by that? Who could possibly stand to gain from a situation like this?
You know, we keep hearing that this law has been designed because UNRWA is colluding or infiltrated by Hamas. But you know, we are just a casualty of this war. We are a soft target. We have been under harsh criticism from Hamas over the last few years because of our education, because we were promoting gender equality, because we were organizing summer camp with girls and boys together to promote art, music, and sport. And there is also in Israel a belief that if you get rid of UNRWA, you will strip the Palestinian from the refugee status, and through this you will also undermine the future aspiration of the Palestinian for self-determination. In a certain extent, they are unilaterally modifying the parameter for a future solution. So yes, I do believe that the primary reason behind this law, and we heard it from the author of the law saying this is one opportunity in a generation to once for all put an end to the refugee status or to the victimhood that UNRWA might have perpetuated. But here again, it's a false argument because even if UNRWA would end its activities, the refugee status will continue. The refugee status is enshrined in Resolution 194 of the General Assembly, where the mandate of UNRWA is enshrined in a completely different resolution which was adopted later on.
Let's talk about aid. We all know that the Biden administration set an ultimatum and said aid needs to increase into Gaza. Where do we stand currently on that? Are they anywhere near meeting those goals? And you talk a lot about accountability. What if those goals are not met? What actually happens in the international system?
Well, you know, the Secretary General in his opening remark at the General Assembly was highlighting the impunity crisis the world is going through, and this applies also to the situation in Gaza. We have seen over the last months that aid flow has significantly decreased, while at the same time there have been an increase of military operation, but also increase of humanitarian needs. And this is the reason why we hear from our colleagues that hunger is spreading, that famine is again at the corner, and people in reality are also dying because of this disease and the hunger. And I think it would be also, I mean, we should also be aware that there is certainly an excess of mortality in the Gaza Strip, which so far has not yet been accounted for.
What's your reaction to the global reaction to this? This is a war really unprecedented in many ways, and a lot of the international media are not able to cover it, but there's heroic journalism and eyewitness testimony happening from people on the ground, journalists on the ground, UN workers on the ground. But what about international reaction? Where's the outrage? Are you Are you shocked by the fact that for many this is perhaps being factored in as just another war?
I think what is shocking is that the unbearable is becoming a new norm and becomes bearable. Yesterday at the Fourth Committee, I was also saying that the difficulty today is that this conflict is so divisive, is so emotional, that people are capable to feel compassion for one side, but not for the other side, which means people have difficulties to understand the suffering and the trauma October 7 has triggered in Israel, and at the same time to feel the suffering, the devastation and the tragedy that the Palestinians are going through. And I think as long we are not capable to have this mutual empathy, mutual compassion, we will still be far away of any reconciliation or any prospect of two people living in harmony or in peace.
What about the financing of UNRWA? It costs a lot of money to support people on the ground, as we all know. The Americans have withheld financial aid for you. Many countries around the world did after the brutal attacks of October the 7th, but that money has come back in. That's not enough, right? What are you projecting in terms of 2025 with the new US administration? And are you also worried that there could be a knock-on effect, that other countries might decide to reverse their decision to fund UNRWA?
You know, to start with, the cost is absolutely nothing compared to what's being invested in military capacity in this conflict. We are talking about $1 or $2 billion, $2 billion maybe in total, to respond to a humanitarian tragedy in Gaza, when we keep hearing about the tens of billions of dollars being invested for the continuation of this war. Now, it is true that the appeal for Gaza is currently underfunded, and that our agency is confronted to, in the past, to a chronic financial crisis, but our financial situation has not improved. As you rightly mentioned, the US, United States, has frozen its contribution. It is and has been a long-standing partner of the agency, the biggest donor. We still have today a shortfall. We are still struggling to cover all our costs between now and the end of the year. And it is true that the forecast for 2025 sounds quite bleak. The US will not start its contribution during the first quarter. Traditionally, they paid their contribution at that time. A number of European countries are also entering into austerity budget. So indeed, 2025 might be financially also a challenging year. In fact, the agency is going through an extraordinary existential crisis. I described it at the General Assembly as being one of the darkest hours the agency is going through. We have a double challenge, the political challenge with the desire to put an end to the agency, and at the same time the financial challenge.
Are there any ways to diversify funding? Are there any countries or regions that might be stepping up to try and fill that gap?
Well, we have